I'm Joy Morris, inviting you to listen to True Stories of the Wild West, hosted by C.R.King, a production of RK Enterprises.
Hello everyone, C.R.King here. Today, on this episode, I'm going to speak about Edward Dohney. Edward Dohney, the oil baron. Did you ever see that movie, There Will Be Blood? Well, keep that name in mind, and I'll get back to you. He was born in 1856. He tried his hands working in various positions, including mining. He roamed around. He was in both Arizona and New Mexico, hoping to strike it rich. When he was poor, he had to get odd jobs, one of which was washing dishes in Tombstone. Dohney and Wyatt Earp knew each other. Most of Tombstone population came out of the southern part of Los Angeles. When the town started to fold, most of that community in Tombstone went back to California. Dohney would go back there as well, but not yet. He went to Arizona. Then he went to New Mexico, and he got a job at the C.R.King mine. They mined for silver. Okay? It was in a town, the Black Hills of New Mexico, called Kington, Kington. It's now a ghost town. This was established in 1882. It was here that he had met Albert Fall, who one day would become Secretary of the Interior for the Warren Harding presidency. He also met Charles Canfield, Charles A. Canfield. He and Canfield formed a partnership, and they attempted to hunt and prospect for mines of their own. It did not work. They broke up the partnership. Dohney met his wife, who worked at the mine as a secretary. He married her, and they had a little girl. She would die before too long, by the age of 7, because she had a bad heart. I'm sorry to tell you that. I hate to see anything bad to little girls or boys. So Canfield decided to explore again, and he asked Dohney to join him, and Dohney turned him down. He had a family, and they were struggling. He said, no, I can't do this. Canfield went out, and he seceded. Well, he mined for a while, and then he sold his mine. He left New Mexico for Los Angeles with $110,000 in his pocket. In Los Angeles, Canfield started buying property. So once in Los Angeles, Dohney teamed up with Mr. Canfield. They were absolutely friends, good friends. Well, Canfield was successful. He invested in real estate. He bought buildings downtown, lots, and he had a number of rentals. Edward Dohney, on the other hand, was dirt poor. He was at the point where he could not even afford to pay rent on his little apartment. He was beside himself. However, timing is everything. One day, a wagon was going by him. He was out in the road somewhere. And he saw this drippy stuff coming from the soil in the back of the wagon. He stopped the driver. He asked him, "Where did you get this?" And the driver said, "At a place called La Brea Tar Pits." Now, the soil was riddled with asphalt, because that's what La Brea Tar Pits is, a huge asphalt pit. It's a great place to go visit. He secured $400. He borrowed $400 from his friend Charles. He bought some land and started drilling. This was in late 1882. It is now early 1893, and it was asphalt that he was looking for. But what happened was he discovered oil. Wow, oil. Now, it was not a gusher. He was able to get 40 barrels a day out of it. I mentioned Emma Summers in another podcast. She drilled a well pretty close to his. She got a gusher. Gushers can be 60, 80, 90, 100,000 barrels a day. She got the gusher. He did not. He was embarrassed, but that's the way it goes. Dohney would strike it out in Los Angeles, and he would ultimately wind up drilling 200 oil wells. Emma Summers would do the same. But there were thousands of oil wells at that time. There was a lot of people that came in on a rush. They had corporations or little companies they named and started, and they too discovered oil. It was spread out. What happened here is Dohney is given credit for being the first man to discover oil in Los Angeles. He was not the first man. Did I mention timing is everything? Well, the first man discovered oil in Los Angeles in 1873. It really didn't go anywhere because it was too early. At this time, in 1893, we had started the Industrial Revolution. Machinery was needed. Oil was needed. We had trains. We had trolleys. They all needed to be lubricated. So when the first man discovered oil, all they had basically was a fluid to light their homes with. There were thousands, 50,000 at one time, of oil wells in the city and surrounding areas. By 40 years later, by 1930, the United States had 1/4 of the world's oil. Big money to be made. And when he discovered it, and the reason he's given the title of the man who discovered oil, because it was the timing when oil was needed to lubricate machines and trains. So Dohney and his counterpart, Emma Summers, were no fools. Brilliant. They had to find the market. And they went out and they searched and they brought the oil to the industry. Otherwise, at that time, oil was cheap because the market fluctuated a lot due to the fact it was only used for lighting, streetlights, whatever. But Dohney decided to expand. This man had a vision. He wanted to be filthy rich, and he was, or he soon will be. He married another woman, Estelle, his second wife. They never had children, but she helped. Actually, she raised Dohney's son, Dohney Jr., affectionately called Ned. His mother committed suicide after Edward divorced her, and their daughter died. She could not handle it. So he left the business in his wife's hand. Dohney went to Mexico in search for more oil. He was down there for a long time because this man absolutely discovered a whole lot of oil. And he was there, running the show, hiring the crews, training them, making arrangements for the oil to be shipped. It was a lot of work. But his wife ran the business. before I go further, understand something. Today, even today, the Dohney family is still in Los Angeles. There are families that go back to the time of when Spain ruled old California that are still here. You just don't hear anything about these people. They're private. Carrie Dohney ran the business. Yet everything you read about Edward Dohney, he was the man that donated so much money that basically started St. Vincent College, which became St. Mary's College. Millions of dollars were donated. But it wasn't Edward Dohney that did so. It was his wife. She was in charge. Now, I know this for a fact. I got close to some very old family who were best friends with the Doheneys, who clued me in. Today, it's 2021. The women still run the business. The men work for the ladies. There's one woman who's in charge. She dictates to everybody, and they follow her rule. It's been passed down. When this lady retires or passes away, another Dohney woman will take over. Now, I'm not going to tell you how I found this out. I'm not going to give names. It's nobody's business. But this is how the Doheneys rule. That is how the family is run. The women in charge, the men do the work that they're told. They're the figureheads, and it seems to work for them because it's worked for generations. Now, let's talk about the wife again. Her first name was Carrie Estelle. She went by Estelle. Bitso. When they got married, and the oil was discovered, and her husband expanded it to 200 wells. He went to Mexico, as I mentioned. It was her job at that point to take care of the family personal expenses, including the management of their Chester Place estate in Beverly Hills. She donated large sums of money to various charities and institutions. She gave $1.1 million for the library at USC in memory of her stepson, Edward Ned Dohney Jr., who was murdered, shot to death in his home. The murder was never solved. She also funded the construction of the St. Vincent Church in Los Angeles and buildings at Loyola Marymount University. She gave a rare book collection to St. John's Cemetery, in Camarillo. For her services to the Catholic Church, she was awarded the title of Papal Countess by Pope Pius XII in 1939. Now, her husband, Edward, was always a controversial person. He died in 1935. And when he passed away, she destroyed all of his personal papers. Everything gone, burned. It was his last wish. In 1949, she established the still active Carrie Estelle Dohney Foundation that does charitable works. The campus, the Dohney home at Chester Place, is now the campus for Mount St. Mary's College. Now, I mentioned the movie There Will Be Blood. According to my friend, actually, if you read about it, he'll tell you it's loosely based on the life of Edward Dohney. according to my friend that is extremely close to the Dohney family. It is his life. It's extremely canny and scary how this man lived. He was ruthless. His wife, when burning up his papers, destroyed everything that could go back at the family. And she put all of the donations in his name to make him look good. This is the end of the Dohney talk. I could have gone on more and more and tell you about all of the companies he formed and what towns, but that's a little boring. That is boring. You have the idea of who he was and what he was. Go see the movie. You'll see how ruthless this man was. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. I hope you liked it. I'll be back for more. This is C.R.King, your friendly historian, and I guess podcaster. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Stay tuned for next week's tale.